The Battle of New Orleans, fought on January 8, 1815, stands as a pivotal moment in American military history, marking the final major engagement of the War of 1812. Despite the Treaty of Ghent being signed on December 24, 1814, officially ending the war, news had not yet reached the forces in Louisiana, leading to this consequential confrontation. Hi there, I'm Kyle, the host of History of Human Evolution. With a PhD in history and a love for storytelling, I'm here to guide you through the fascinating journey of our species. If you like to explore the past, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your thoughts below. In late 1814, British forces set their sights on New Orleans, a city of immense strategic importance. Controlling the mouth of the Mississippi River, New Orleans was the key to trade, supply lines, and territorial control in the American South. If the British succeeded, they could choke American commerce, establish a permanent foothold in Louisiana, and potentially sever the Western territories from the Union. The War of 1812 was drawing to a close, but with no knowledge of the Treaty of Ghent, which had been signed on December 24, 1814, both sides prepared for a decisive engagement. The British strategy aimed for a swift, overwhelming invasion. Their forces, commanded by Major General Sir Edward Pakenham, consisted of over 8,000 battle-hardened troops, including regiments that had fought against Napoleon in Europe. The British naval superiority allowed them to move freely along the Gulf Coast, striking at American defenses and positioning themselves for a final push toward New Orleans. Before the main assault, British forces had already captured Pensacola in Spanish Florida and had begun operations in Lake Borgne, eliminating American naval resistance in the region. For the Americans, the situation was dire. Major General Andrew Jackson, who had recently led a successful campaign against the Creek Nation, now faced a much greater threat. With New Orleans vulnerable, Jackson rushed to fortify the city, calling upon a diverse and unconventional force. He recruited regular U.S. Army soldiers, state militias from Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi, local Free Black militia units, Native American warriors, and even Jean Lafitte's pirate forces. With barely 4,000 men, Jackson understood that he could not fight a conventional battle against the British. Instead, he would rely on fortifications, terrain, and strategic deception. Jackson ordered the construction of defensive earthworks along the Rodriguez Canal, for miles south of New Orleans. The canal, running between the Mississippi River and the surrounding swamp, would serve as a natural defensive barrier, forcing the British into a narrow approach where their numbers would count for less. Behind this position, artillery placements were reinforced, and riflemen were stationed to create overlapping fields of fire. The British, confident in their numerical superiority, underestimated Jackson's defensive position. As they advanced toward New Orleans, they assumed that American forces would break quickly, unaware that they were about to face one of the most effective defensive stands in U.S. military history. The Battle of New Orleans brought together two vastly different armies, one a disciplined European force with years of experience in Napoleonic warfare, the other a patchwork of militias, frontiersmen, and irregular fighters unified under a single commander. The contrast in composition would prove decisive when battle was finally joined. The British Expeditionary Force, commanded by Major General Sir Edward Pakenham, numbered between 8,000 and 9,000 men. These were elite, battle-hardened troops, many of whom had fought in the Peninsular War against Napoleon. The British units included 1st and 5th West India Regiments, colonial troops drawn from the British Caribbean garrisons; 7th Royal Fusiliers, Regiment of Foot, a veteran infantry unit with a history dating back to the 17th century; 43rd and 85th Light Infantry Regiments, trained in skirmishing and rapid maneuvers, well suited for open-field combat; 95th Rifles, Green Jackets, one of the most effective marksman regiments in the British Army, equipped with Baker rifles, which had superior range compared to American muskets. Royal Navy and Royal Marines provided logistical support, artillery cover, and amphibious landing capabilities. Royal Artillery, a well-trained artillery corps that supported British infantry with Congreve rockets and cannon fire. The British strategy relied on coordinated frontal assaults, massed volleys, and tightly disciplined formations to overwhelm enemy defenses. However, the terrain and the nature of Jackson's forces would disrupt these conventional tactics. General Andrew Jackson commanded a force of approximately 4,500 men, though this number fluctuated as reinforcements trickled in from surrounding states. Unlike the professional British Army, Jackson's force was a mix of different military traditions, backgrounds, and fighting styles. His army included U.S. Army regulars, the backbone of Jackson's force, including the 7th Infantry Regiment, well-trained in formal battlefield tactics, Tennessee and Kentucky militia, rough frontiersmen, many armed with long rifles, known for their deadly marksmanship but lacking the discipline of professional soldiers. Louisiana militia, a mix of French Creole, Spanish, and Anglo-American soldiers, drawn from the local population. Free men of color, 2 battalions of African-American volunteers, many of whom were veterans of the Haitian Revolution, trained in both muskets and hand-to-hand combat. Choctaw warriors, Native American allies who provided reconnaissance, ambush tactics, and skirmishing capabilities. Jean Lafitte's Barratarian pirates, outlaws who possessed superior artillery skills and a deep knowledge of the bayous and waterways. Lafitte's men proved invaluable in manning the American artillery batteries, using their naval gunnery expertise to deliver devastating volleys. The British troops were better armed and better drilled, equipped with standard-issue Brown Bess muskets, bayonets, and Congreve rockets. Their reliance on tight formations and massed volleys was effective in European warfare but less suited for the swamps and riverbanks of Louisiana. In contrast, Jackson's men fought a war of adaptation. The American riflemen from Kentucky and Tennessee had greater range than British muskets, allowing them to pick off officers and disrupt formations before the British could close the distance. Jackson's artillery, manned by Lafitte's pirates and experienced gunners, was highly effective, delivering devastating shrapnel and grapeshot into enemy ranks. The British entered the battle with confidence in their numbers and experience. The Americans, though outnumbered and outgunned on paper, would prove that terrain, tactics, and leadership could overcome raw military power. Andrew Jackson knew that New Orleans could not fall. A British victory would not only cripple the United States' control over the Mississippi River, but also open the door for further incursions into the newly acquired Louisiana territory. Outnumbered and facing one of the most experienced armies in the world, Jackson had to turn the battlefield itself into a weapon. He established his main defensive position 4 miles south of New Orleans along the Rodriguez Canal, a narrow waterway running from the Mississippi River to the impassable cypress swamps. This location forced the British into a bottleneck, preventing them from using their superior numbers to outflank the American lines. To reinforce this position, Jackson ordered the digging of earthworks and embankments, using mud, logs, and cotton bales to create an 8-foot-high defensive wall. Behind this barricade, artillery positions were strategically placed, ensuring that any British advance would be met with concentrated fire. Jean Lafitte's men, skilled in naval gunnery, took charge of many of these artillery batteries, ensuring deadly accuracy. The canal itself was widened and flooded, making any direct charge against the American line even more hazardous. Sharpened wooden stakes were driven into the ground, creating a secondary obstacle for British infantry attempting to cross. Riflemen and skirmishers were stationed along the flanks, ready to exploit any weakness in the enemy's approach. Jackson's defensive layout was designed to force the British into a direct frontal assault, something that played into the strengths of his men. The long rifles of the Kentucky and Tennessee militias had a greater range than British muskets, allowing marksmen to target officers and disrupt formations before they even reached the earthworks. The Choctaw warriors, skilled in guerrilla warfare, patrolled the surrounding swamps, ensuring that no flanking maneuver could go unnoticed. Further down the Mississippi, Jackson placed an artillery position at Fort St. Philip, ensuring that British naval support could not directly assist in the land assault. This strategic placement effectively isolated the British ground forces, forcing them to rely entirely on their own infantry and artillery. As Jackson's men prepared for battle, British forces underestimated the strength of the defenses. To them, New Orleans was already within their grasp. What they did not realize was that they were about to charge into one of the most formidable defensive positions of the War of 1812. Before dawn on January 8, 1815, British forces under Major General Sir Edward Pakenham advanced toward the American defensive line at Rodriguez Canal, confident that their superior numbers and battlefield experience would break Jackson's improvised force. The fog-shrouded fields along the Mississippi River concealed their movements, but as they neared the American earthworks, the fog suddenly lifted, exposing the advancing British troops. From behind their barricades, Jackson's men opened fire with devastating accuracy. The British strategy hinged on a two-pronged attack. The main force, led by Pakenham himself, would charge directly at Jackson's defensive line. Simultaneously, a flanking force under Colonel William Thornton was to cross the Mississippi River, seize the West Bank, and capture American artillery positions, which could then be turned against the main defenses. As the British infantry surged forward, they were immediately met with withering fire from American rifles, artillery, and cannon grapeshot. The long-range Kentucky and Tennessee riflemen, positioned behind the earthworks, picked off British officers and soldiers with deadly precision. The British troops, trained to fight in tight Napoleonic formations, were vulnerable to American firepower in the open fields. Within minutes, the British lines began to break down under the relentless assault. Adding to the chaos, the British flanking force faced unexpected delays. A combination of logistical failures, strong river currents, and American artillery fire slowed their crossing. Thornton's force was unable to secure the American gun emplacements in time, leaving Jackson's artillery batteries intact and able to continue their devastating bombardment of the British advance. With his first wave faltering, Pakenham ordered a full-scale assault, believing that sheer force could overwhelm the American defenses. The British 93rd Highlanders, one of the most elite units in the British Army, charged toward the center of Jackson's line, only to be cut down in waves by heavy cannon fire. The Cotton Bales defense, reinforced with mud and timber, absorbed musket and artillery fire but provided the Americans a solid firing position. British Congreve rockets fired in retaliation, but they had little effect against the fortified American position. As the battle raged, Pakenham rode forward to rally his men, urging them to push through the American defenses. Just as he was giving orders, he was struck by grapeshot and fell mortally wounded. The loss of their commander further disoriented the British ranks, leaving many units leaderless in the face of continued fire. Within an hour, the British assault had completely unraveled. Units that had reached the outer edges of the American defenses found themselves isolated and were either slaughtered or forced to retreat. With Pakenham dead, Major General Samuel Gibbs mortally wounded, and Colonel Rennie killed, command structure collapsed. The remaining British forces began a desperate retreat, leaving thousands of dead and wounded on the battlefield. Despite the overwhelming victory, Jackson held his position, wary of a possible second attack. As the smoke cleared, the extent of the British defeat became evident. The British had suffered over 2,000 casualties, including 300 dead, while American losses were astonishingly low, with fewer than 100 men killed or wounded. As the last British forces withdrew, the battlefield was littered with red-coated bodies, a grim testament to the overwhelming firepower and strategic advantage of Jackson's forces. The British had gambled everything on a single decisive assault and lost. The battlefield of New Orleans was a scene of devastation. British forces had suffered a catastrophic defeat, with over 2,000 casualties, including hundreds dead, wounded, or missing. Among them were Major General Edward Pakenham, Major General Samuel Gibbs, and Colonel Robert Rennie, leaving the British force leaderless and demoralized. In contrast, Andrew Jackson's army lost fewer than 100 men, a staggering imbalance that highlighted the effectiveness of American defenses and strategy. With their army in disarray and incapable of further offensive action, the British retreated to their fleet, abandoning the campaign against New Orleans. By January 18, 1815, they had completely withdrawn from Louisiana. Their failure to seize the city ended British ambitions in the Gulf of Mexico and reinforced American control over the Mississippi River. The surviving British forces redirected their efforts toward an attack on Mobile, Alabama, but by the time they reached their target, the war had already ended. News of the Treaty of Ghent, which had been signed on December 24, 1814, but had not yet reached North America due to slow communication, finally arrived weeks after the battle. The treaty officially ended the War of 1812, restoring pre-war borders and resolving none of the original causes of the war. Though the Battle of New Orleans had no effect on the treaty's terms, it had profound implications for the American national psyche and the political landscape. Andrew Jackson emerged as a national hero, with his victory transforming him into a symbol of American resilience and military prowess. His triumph at New Orleans propelled him to national prominence, and within 15 years, he would be elected President of the United States in 1828. The battle cemented his reputation as a defender of the Republic, a status that he cultivated throughout his political career. The battle also reinforced American nationalism, fostering a sense of pride and unity after a war that had otherwise been indecisive. Many Americans mistakenly believed that the victory at New Orleans had won the war, elevating it to mythic status in U.S. history. The phrase "we have met the enemy and they are ours," though originally attributed to Oliver Hazard Perry at the Battle of Lake Erie, was often invoked in the context of Jackson's overwhelming victory. For the British, New Orleans was a bitter and unnecessary defeat, marking one of the final engagements of the Napoleonic Wars era. The loss underscored the limitations of British power in North America and confirmed that the United States was a sovereign nation capable of defending its borders. It was the last time Britain would launch a full-scale invasion of U.S. territory. The battle's legacy extended beyond its immediate military impact. It validated the effectiveness of militia forces when properly led, showcased the importance of artillery in defensive warfare, and highlighted the role of unconventional alliances. Pirates, Native Americans, free black soldiers, and frontiersmen all fought under the same banner. It remains one of the most celebrated battles in American history, immortalized in legend, folklore, and even popular culture. Though fought after the war had officially ended, the Battle of New Orleans became the defining moment of the War of 1812, reshaping the way the conflict was remembered in the United States. It was a victory that proved America could stand on its own against one of the most formidable military powers in the world. We'd love to hear your thoughts on possible future topics. What areas of human evolution would you like to explore next? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. As always, our references and further reading are listed in the description below if you'd like to dive deeper into the subject. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. And do not forget, subscribe to the knowledge.